Look, you are going to hate me after what I am about to tell you, but if you have less than a certain amount invested, compounding sucks, and you are probably below it. You think compounding is always working for you. It is not for years, maybe decades. It is barely doing anything. Everyone says, trust the process. But what they skip is the part where your portfolio sits completely flat for what feels like forever, and you start wondering if you are doing something wrong. You are not doing anything wrong. You just haven't hit the number yet. And once you do, everything changes. There is a specific dollar amount sitting inside the compounding curve, a threshold, and once your portfolio crosses it, the math shifts in a way that most investors never fully understand until they are already on the other side of it. Before that number, you are the engine, your paycheck, your discipline, your sacrifice. That is what is moving the needle after that number. Something else takes over, and for the first time in your investing life, your money starts doing more work than you do. My name is DD09, and I have lived this. I graduated in 2020 when the world was literally on fire. I had $0. I had a degree that felt like a piece of paper in a ghost town. I made every stupid mistake you can imagine. I chased penny stocks. I tried to time the market during the 2020 crash and lost money because I was too scared to stay in. I listened to fake gurus who promised 1,000% returns in a week. Oh shit, I felt like a failure. But I got sober about the math. I realized that $120,000, which is where my portfolio sits today, was not built on luck. It was built on understanding that the first phase of wealth is a grind and the second phase is a ride. In this video, I am going to show you exactly what that number is and how to get there in the fastest possible way. So make sure to stay until the end if you want to have a step-by-step strategy. Let us start with something that almost nobody talks about, which is how boring and discouraging the early years of investing actually are. Say you open a brokerage account at 25, you are earning a decent income. Let us say around $70,000 a year, you decide to be disciplined. You save 15% of your income. So that is about $875 a month going into index funds like VOO. You set it up automatically. You do not touch it. You do everything right. Year one ends, you check your account. You have put in around $10,500 and the market return may be 10%. So your balance is around $11,500. Great, but does it feel great? Not really. It feels like you worked an entire year and barely moved year two. Same thing, you keep contributing. The account grows a little faster now. Maybe you are at $25,000 by the end of year two. Year five rolls around and you are somewhere around $65,000 to $70,000. That is real money, but it has taken you 5 years of consistent discipline to get there. No expensive vacations, no lifestyle upgrades, just steady contributions. Year 10, you check the account. You might be looking at something like $170,000 to $185,000. And here is where it gets psychologically strange. You have been doing this for a decade, 10 years of discipline, 10 years of delayed gratification, 10 years of watching your friends spend money you chose not to spend. And yet the account does not look dramatically different from what you would have if you just stuffed cash in a drawer. The compounding is happening, but it is quiet, almost invisible. This is the phase where most investors quit, not because they run out of money, because they run out of patience. And that is a problem because the thing they are quitting right before is the thing that would have changed everything. So what is actually happening mathematically during these early years, and why does it feel so discouraging even when you are technically doing everything right? Let us get into the actual numbers because this is where it gets interesting. The SP 500 has delivered an average annual return of around 10.3% since 1957, including dividends. That number is real. It is historical data going back nearly 70 years. More recently, over the last 30 years through the end of 2024, the average annual return has been closer to 10.5%. And over the last 5 years, from 2019 to 2024, the SP 500 averaged 13.6%. So the data is consistent. The market over long periods grows. That is not the issue. The issue is what 10% actually means when applied to a small portfolio. Because when your portfolio is small, 10% of a small number is still a small number. If you have $20,000 invested and the market returns 10%, you made $2,000. That is nice, but you probably contributed more than that in a single month. Your savings rate is still outrunning your returns by a wide margin. At $50,000, a 10% return gives you $5,000 better, but your contributions are still doing more work than the market is. At $100,000, 10% gives you $10,000. Now, we are getting somewhere. If you are contributing $10,500 a year, the market is almost matching your personal contribution, almost. But here is where it shifts. At $200,000, a 10% return gives you $20,000 in a single year. That is more than most people invest annually. The market just outworked your savings rate, and your balance did not even look like it jumped. It just quietly moved from $200,000 to $220,000. Still looks boring on the surface. Now, let us go to $250,000, same 10% return. That is $25,000 of growth in 1 year tax advantaged. No additional effort, no raise required, just a portfolio doing its job. And then you hit it, the real threshold. The number where everything accelerates $300,000 at $300,000. A 10% annual return gives you $30,000. That is the equivalent of a massive raise that you did not have to earn, negotiate, or trade hours for. If you are saving $15,000 a year from your paycheck, the market just doubled your annual progress, and you did nothing differently. This is the inflection point. Now, I want to be precise here because the exact threshold is different for everyone depending on their savings rate, but research into contribution versus compounding dynamics shows that around $250,000 to $350,000 is where for the average investor contributing between $12,000 and $20,000 annually. Market returns begin consistently outpacing personal contributions. That is the zone. And $300,000 sits right in the middle of it. This is backed by real math at a 10% return. $300,000 generates $30,000 annually. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median American household saves less than $20,000 per year. That means at $300,000, the average investor portfolio is already growing faster than their ability to add to it. The portfolio has officially taken over as the primary engine of wealth creation. That is a massive shift, and most people cross that threshold without even realizing it happened. But here's what makes this hard to see in real time, even after you cross $300,000. The compounding does not feel explosive right away. Year 1 at $300,000, portfolio grows to $330,000. Fine. Year 2, maybe $363,000. Okay, year 3, around $399,000. You are close to $400,000, but it still feels slow. Year 5, somewhere around $483,000. Now it is moving, but it still does not feel like a surge. Year 8, over $640,000. Year 10, pushing $780,000 to $800,000. Year 15, well over $1.2 million. And year 20, with continued contributions, you are looking at somewhere between $1.8 million and $2.2 million. Even with a conservative 8% assumption, the curve was always bending upward. You just could not feel it in real time. This is how compounding actually works. It does not announce itself. It builds silently. And then one day, you look at your account and the growth from a single year is more than you made at your first job. There is another layer here that most people miss. It is not just about the returns getting bigger. It is about what happens to your relationship with your income. When your portfolio is small, your financial life depends almost entirely on your job. A pay cut hurts. Losing your job is a crisis. A bad year at work means a bad year for your finances, full stop. But once you have $300,000 working in the market, your portfolio starts becoming a second income source, a silent one that does not require your time, your energy, or your presence. At $300,000 generating $30,000 annually in returns, that is money moving without you. It does not care if you had a bad month. It does not take sick days. It does not get passed over for promotion. And as that number grows, the portfolio becomes progressively more powerful than your paycheck. At $600,000, it is generating $60,000 a year in average returns. At $1 million, it is over $100,000 a year. Not every year, but on average over time. This is the leverage shift that changes everything, and it starts for most people right around $300,000. But now I need to tell you the part that nobody puts in the highlight reel, because this is where most investors quietly destroy years of progress without realizing it. Reaching $300,000 feels like an achievement, and it is. But psychologically, it creates a trap. After years of discipline, you finally feel like you have made it somewhere. You finally feel like you have earned the right to breathe, and that feeling is exactly what compounding does not need you to have right now, because the years immediately after $300,000 are the most powerful compounding years you will ever experience. The curve is bending, the momentum is building, and the cost of interrupting it right now is higher than it has ever been. Let me show you what that actually means with real numbers. Say you have hit $300,000, the market drops, which it will. At some point, it always does. A normal correction takes your $300,000 down to $225,000. That is a 25% drop. It feels devastating. It looks like years of work evaporating. So you do what feels smart. You move to cash. You wait for things to settle down. But here's what the data shows. Missing even the 10 best days in the market over a 30-year period can cut your total return nearly in half. According to a JP Morgan study, an investor who stayed fully invested in the SP 500 from 2003 to 2022 earned an average annual return of 9.8%. An investor who missed just the 10 best days over those 20 years earned 5.6%. Miss the 20 best days and you are down to 2%. Those 10 best days often happen during or immediately after the worst stretches of the market. If you are sitting in cash waiting for things to feel safe, you miss them. And at $300,000, missing them is not just expensive, it is compounding expensive, because every dollar that stays out of the market is a dollar that isn't compounding. And at this stage, each dollar compounds faster than ever. The second trap is one that feels completely rational but costs you enormously over time. Lifestyle inflation. You have been disciplined for years. You have watched other people buy new cars and upgrade their homes while you kept contributing. Now you have $300,000 and it finally feels okay to enjoy some of it. So you upgrade the car, maybe $45,000. You tell yourself you have earned it. Here's the math on that decision. $45,000 removed from a portfolio at $300,000 left alone for 20 years. At a 10% average return would have become roughly $300,000. You did not just buy a car. You spent $300,000 $100,000 of future wealth on a car that, by the way, will be worth almost nothing in 10 years. This is not about living like you are broke forever. It is about understanding the real cost of pulling capital out of compounding at this exact stage. Because you are not pulling out money, you are pulling out momentum. The people who build 8-figure portfolios are not, for the most part, people who out-earned everyone else. They are people who understood two things very clearly. First, once the engine starts running, you protect it. Second, living below your means is the only true cheat code. So let us bring this together. The first phase of investing from zero to around $100,000 is brutal. Everything depends on you. Your contributions do almost all the work. The market help is minimal. This phase requires the most discipline for the smallest visible reward, and it is where most people give up. I call this the accumulation grind. The second phase, $100,000 to $300,000, is where compounding starts showing up in a meaningful way. Your returns are becoming noticeable, but you are still doing most of the heavy lifting. Your savings rate still matters more than your returns. And then there is the third phase, the one that starts around $300,000. This is where the math changes. This is where your portfolio starts generating returns that exceed your annual savings. This is where your capital begins outworking your effort. This is where compounding for the first time actually feels like it is working with you instead of behind you. But this is also the most dangerous phase psychologically because it looks slow even when it is accelerating. Because the urge to reward yourself or to protect yourself during downturns is at its highest, right when the process needs you to stay the course most. The rule is simple. Even if following it isn't, stay invested. Keep contributing. Don't interrupt the chain. Think about what that actually looks like in practice. When the market drops 20%, you don't sell. When your account looks flat for 6 months, you keep contributing. When a shiny new investment opportunity shows up promising faster returns, you ignore it and stick with your plan. When a financial news channel says a crash is coming, you mute it and stay the course. That is it. That is the whole strategy after $300,000. The hard work of building the portfolio is mostly done. The hard work now is psychological. It is managing yourself, managing the urge to react, to tweak, to optimize, to do something. The best investors at this stage are often the ones who do the least, because compounding does not care how smart you are. It does not care how much you have sacrificed or how long you have waited. It only rewards one thing: continuous time in the market, uninterrupted year after year. The SP 500 average annual return over the last 150 years is around 9.4%. Over the last 30 years, closer to 10.5%. Those numbers applied to $300,000 over 20 years turn into life-changing wealth. Not because of anything dramatic, not because of a hot stock or a lucky bet, just because the engine was allowed to run. That is the secret. Not exciting, but real. And 20 years from now, when your portfolio is generating more income than your job ever did, you remember the years you stayed patient, but you will absolutely feel what that patience built. Now, I know some of you are thinking, I am nowhere near $300,000. I am just starting. I am at zero. Look, I was at zero in 2020. I am at $120,000 today. I did not get here by being a genius. I got here by being a machine. I follow a strict 70-20-10 portfolio. 70% goes into VU. That is my core. It is the 500 biggest companies in America. It is my bet on the future. 20% goes into SHD. That is for the dividends. It is the income engine that helps me sleep at night when the market is red. The last 10% goes into VUG. That is the aggressive growth. That is my moonshot. I do not care if that 10% goes down 50%, because the 70% core is solid. This system took me from a broke graduate to a 6-figure investor in less than 6 years. It was not fast, it was not easy, but it was certain. The math does not lie. If you put $1,000 a month into VO and it grows at 10%, you will hit $100,000 in about 7 years. The next 100K takes less than 5 years. The next 100K takes about 3 years. The speed increases even though your effort stays the same. That is the magic of the curve, but you have to survive the first 7 years to see the miracle. Most people quit in year 3 because they only have $40,000 and they think it is taking too long. Do not be that person. Stay in the game, lower your expenses, drive the old car, eat the home-cooked meals, invest the difference. Your future self is begging you to be disciplined today. They are begging you to reach that $300,000 mark. Because once you do, the heavy lifting